Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jennifer Tafe. I am the director of the Museum of American Bird Art at Mass Audubon, and we are thrilled to welcome you all here tonight for the next lecture in our series this fall, The Art of Birds, Avians as Symbols, Stewards, and Storytellers. I would love to thank our staff at Mass Audubon, AJ, for helping to make these lectures happen. And I'd also like to extend a very special thanks to Fred and Faith Sandstrom for their incredible generosity in supporting this series. We could not do it without them. We will have a time at the end of the lecture for questions, and I encourage you to ask those in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to them at the end of the talk. And we are just thrilled tonight to welcome our speaker, Natasza Fontaine. Natasza holds a Master of Science in Biology from Florida State University. Her thesis focused on how avian species richness relates to plant species composition and vegetation structure during non-breeding seasons. Prior to obtaining her master's, Natasza worked at the William and Linda Steer Herbarium at the New York Botanical Garden and collected data on northern mockingbirds throughout New York City and Westchester counties. After completing her degree, Natasza worked as an avian field biologist in the Southeast and Southwest and has volunteer experience in South America. Currently, she is a shorebird seabird biologist for Audubon, Florida, based in the Florida Panhandle. She is very interested in understanding habitat associations for migratory species, bioacoustics, and bioacoustics monitoring. She is an avid avian recordist and a natural science illustrator, which we are going to get to see a lot of tonight. Natasza is also the American Birding Association's Bird of the Year artist. You probably remember seeing her work on the cover of the 2024 issue, January issue of Birding magazine, her incredibly beautiful Golden-winged Warbler painting. She is also right now visiting biology professor at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, also known as MassArt. And her course, Sound and Color, focuses on exploring the biodiversity of birds through a creative lens. And I'm thrilled to say that we are also collaborating with Natasza's class on a small project that we'll be so excited to share with all of you when that is complete. So I'm very excited to call her a new friend and colleague, and very excited to welcome her tonight. Please welcome Natasza Fontaine.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can get started. Let's see. Share my sound here. Oops. Here it is. Okay. I just want to make sure my sound is shared and okay. So just as
Natasza,
yes.
do you mind sharing again, because all we see is a black screen. We don't see.
Oh yeah, it's gonna get started. Do you see that now?
Yep. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. So as Jennifer mentioned, that I'm an early career avian ecologist, field biologist. I love field work. I'm also a birder. I have a passion for bioacoustics from a research point of view, but also from a creative perspective. There's a lot of creativity around bioacoustics that can be done that I'm very passionate about. I am a natural science illustrator, and I appreciate, although I would say 95% of the time it's about birds, but I appreciate all of nature. Um, and so what I'm going to talk about now is kind of give you a little bit of background, just to give you some background about about my journey, um, combining all of my passions into one. And some of these events are overlapping with each other, so hopefully it won't be too confusing. So in 2017, I had a fantastic opportunity to attend the Cornell Lab of Ornithology Sound Recording Workshop in Ithaca. And it was a week workshop where we traveled throughout the field, throughout Ithaca, recording and learning recording techniques, testing different types of equipment, and also learning how to analyze audio in a sense of annotating it and as well as cleaning up recordings. And while I was there, I met a wonderful group of people that were not only researchers and very passionate about bioacoustics, but they were also artists and writers and musicians that were looking to learn more about bioacoustics and learn how to hone in their recording technique so they can use the sound for other projects. Um, Last but not least, during this time was the first time I've ever used a parabolic mic. And when I used it, it completely changed my world. It took sound to another level for me. So so that was one week in 2017. During that time, I was working at the New York Botanical Garden. I was working in the herbarium, and occasionally I was taking botanical illustration courses. And so I've always kind of been a scribbler, but I never really took my art to another level because sometimes during art class in undergrad, it's usually drawing people. And being honest, I don't want to draw people. So I learned that, at New York Botanical Garden, there was a botanical illustration certificate. And so I started taking courses there. And this is where I learned the technique of light on form, where I learned how to use graphite in a more traditional botanical sense. This is a dahlia that I illustrated from a live specimen. Um, and here is a sensitive fern that I also illustrated from a live specimen. And one thing about botanical illustration, it really emphasizes on being very detailed. And I would say I'm 50-50 detailed person. But I really found it, I just found a passion for getting these details in with the graphite. Graphite is just such a forgiving medium and fun medium. And so I really, really took to it. And here's a cyclamen that I also created as one of my final projects. And here with this group of people that I was taking courses with occasionally, I met someone that was taking a class, which was a workshop at the American Museum of Natural History. And so I used to fight against not doing multiple things at the same time, but I figured that now that's my personality. So I just was like, okay, great. There's another workshop for me to take. And so I signed up for it, and it was fantastic because you have your museum specimens it was in the evening from 7 to 9. not open to the public, and you had to sign up for this. And here I was able to now use the technique that I learned in botanical illustration and start applying them to other organisms. And during this time of really working on mastering the graphite technique, I also started to, I guess, be a little bit more creative and not necessarily so so strict as botanical illustration. And so, for example, this piece here that I did with the squirrel, I illustrated a number of different species of acorns, just as a symbol of abundance when it comes to nature and how abundant nature can be. And so one thing I didn't mention is while I'm taking classes, I'm still working at New York Botanical Garden, I'm also birding and I'm still recording on the side because I'm still mastering my recording skills. And so with that, I'm going to play one of my first recordings here. And I would really love it if you know what call this is, please put it in the Q&A. That would be fantastic. If you don't, that's no problem. Just a little fun part of of the presentation. And so mastering recording and mastering my graphite, to me, it was just a natural progression to bird art. So from this point on, I will be telling short stories about that journey and recording as well as illustrating together. Okay, so I'm going to play the first recording. And if you know that call, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. I'll give everyone a few seconds. I'll play it one more time. Okay. Seems like we have someone here. A crow. That is a very good guess, but it is actually, I can see how that would sound like a crow. A green heron. And so this experience here, this was one of my first recordings of a green heron. And so I was out birding and I saw green heron there. And when I first saw it and it saw me, it flew off. And while it was flying off, it gave a few calls. And then I missed those first calls. And that's something about when it comes down to recording is that you're not always recording. So sometimes you miss the call. And so that was a little frustrating for me. But with some patience, I just kind of waited for the bird to come back and to continue doing what it was doing before I had startled it, which was hunting. And while I was observing this behavior, it flew off again and it made the call and I was able to do that recording. And so one thing about recording that I love is that it builds I personally think it builds a greater intimacy with birds when you're listening, and that translates into the artwork. And so I was inspired by this to go back to the Museum of Natural History. I created this green heron illustration in graphite with a combination. So the way I work is by a combination of resources. And so from the images that I took that day, having the inspiration from the recording, going to the museum and looking at their specimen, I created this illustration with that technique that I learned from the botanical garden and including the finer details and doing my best to give the feathers of this beautiful bird some justice. So hopefully I did. Okay, so now the next story. I'm going to play a recording again, and please put it in the chat. I think a lot of you will know which what this one is. Okay, let me see if anyone. Oh, there's something there. Let's see. Yes, a great horned owl, exactly. And so working at the New York Botanical Garden, I was a bit spoiled because I was working there, I also had the privilege of being able to be there after hours and before hours as well. And so this recording was inspired by this wonderful moment that, oops, it's not progressing. There it is. Um, I was able to record the courtship calls right at the beginning of breeding season of this pair of great horned owls. And from being able to record them of courtship to them nesting in the top corner of the building that I worked in, I was able to see them every single day. And it was such a beautiful moment because not only did I have the recording of them, but I also got to see the courtship, the beginning of nesting, and then the chicks hatching and attempting fledging. I'm not sure what happened here, but I called this little buddy here. Let me put my laser up. This buddy here, ledge baby. It must have attempted to fledge and it fell down on one of the ledges in the building. And I really love this photo because the background is the Bronx. And it really shows how nature is so resilient, how birds are so resilient. To go through this courtship um, with this loud background and all of these buildings and survive. This time was a scary time for me because every day there were crows harassing this young owl. So it was a bit stressful. And then I finally got to see them successfully fledge. And so it was a really beautiful moment from start to finish that I was able to see these birds. And of course, that's what inspired my next piece, whoops, which is a great horned owl that I did in graphite because I'm still in love with graphite here. And um, it was really a challenging piece to do because I wanted to really give that soft touch to the feathers that owls have. And I think I accomplished it, but still, when I look at it today, I'm like, okay, maybe, maybe I could have made this side a little fluffier. Okay, and so now moving on to the next story this was my first true intentional migration birding. And what I mean by that is I spent all winter preparing for this. And so once again, I had the privilege of doing this intentional migration birding at New York Botanical Garden, where all of these fantastic warblers were coming through. And there's a nice bridge at the garden where I was able to view the canopy of the tree, so I didn't have to suffer from warbler neck. So uh, wonderful warblers where it's prairie warbler, magnolia warbler, ovenbird, chestnut-sided warbler, black-throated blue, black and white. And then there's a mystery bird. And so this mystery bird, I recorded it. I never saw the bird. Then I created a piece of artwork because I knew what the recording was. And then I saw the bird in real life. So sometimes that has happened with me where I'm creating work for birds that I've never seen before, and then I see them later. And so I'll play this recording. And once again, please put your answer in the Q&A. Let's see if there are any guesses there. Let's see. Oh, marsh wren. Not a marsh wren, but definitely a small bird. Anyone else? It's a warbler. Cerulean, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. Okay, so it is, whoops, a northern parula. And so this was one of the earlier times that I stepped into color. And like I said in the story, that I created this piece before I actually physically saw the bird. I had heard it and recorded it, but warbler neck, parulas, they're always up in the canopy. So I never actually saw one. And I just used a bunch of different resources. I knew what I had recorded and I decided to illustrate them. And then I finally saw the species during that intentional migration time, which was very exciting because once you illustrate a bird, you just have like this connection with them. So between the recording and illustrating a species, a lot of times I almost feel like, and this might be strange to say, but I am that species now. So at least for that moment in time. Okay. So the next story, I don't have too much of a birding backstory with it, but here's the recording and take a listen and see if anyone has a guess. I'll play it one more time because they're really short and high pitched. Okay, let's see if there are any guesses. Brown creeper, that's a really good guess. Not the species, but I can see how that would sound like a brown creeper. Okay, let me just check if there's anyone else. Cape May. Nope, it's not a warbler. Okay, so it's a cedar waxwing. And I decided to illustrate cedar waxwing because I was so inspired at the way their feathers almost look like velvet to me. And the way the colors just blend in with each other and they have this velvety soft look. For me, I wanted the challenge of trying to create that. And so I used cedar waxwing for that challenge. But I also created a Bohemian waxwing as a comparison. And I have never seen a Bohemian waxwing, at least not yet. So it's another piece of work that I didn't see the species, but I enjoy the way the species looks so much that I wanted that challenge. Okay, so now we're gonna move a little bit more to the southeast. And this was a moment that I was out intentionally recording. And so this time I was looking for red-headed woodpeckers. So I was in a marsh area. I'm giving everyone hints right now of what this will be. I was in a marsh area, freshwater marsh, and I'm waiting for these red-headed woodpeckers that I know are always there to come in and start to call. So I have my recorder on and it's just recording. And all of a sudden I hear and record. And when this sound came out of the marsh, it was about 7 feet away from me. And when I felt the bass inside of me, it would, because I also had headphones on and I'm recording, and I was so excited that I had such a fantastic recording and it was so close. And at the time, I was like, there is no way it's what I think it is. Does anyone have a guess? It's a freshwater marsh species. Okay, I don't think there are any guesses. So that was a king rail. And this was the picture of the actual bird. And so at that moment, I just couldn't believe that this was happening, that this bird was this close to me. They're very secretive, and it's calling right underneath me, like right practically underneath me. So that was just such an amazing moment. And I was frozen because I thought that if I would move, I would completely spook the bird. And I was just able to watch it forage around, walk around, and it just went on its way. It was just such a wonderful moment. And so that inspired me to create my next piece, which is I went back to graphite. And oh, sorry, I didn't mention this before, that a lot of my work I create on hot press watercolor paper. And so this was 11 by 14 graphite, and I had this king rail and the two chicks. I've never seen chicks before of king rails. And so I did a bit of research, visual research, and I just thought it would be a beautiful scene to have such a fierce bird with that fierce sound, and then have these two wonderful, cute little chicks right underneath it. So that was a really exciting moment for me, but also creating this piece and adding the chicks to it, really, it just built a different level of intimacy with the king rail. Now, I mean, I will not be able to unidentify or misidentify, I should say, sorry, misidentify a king rail. Okay, moving on to the next. This is a bit of a follow up on what I do now. So I am a seabird / shorebird biologist, and a lot of my position in the field, I am monitoring colonies. And colony life is loud. I have this recording. I'm going to play it for you all. It is loud. Colony life is extraordinary because everything is happening at the same time. Birds are hatching, birds are dying, birds are mating, birds are fighting, birds are eating, birds are starving. Like everything is happening at the same time. Colony life is intense. And so with that being said, have a listen of this recording, and you'll see what I mean by everything is happening at the same time. So, like I said, everything is happening at the same time, and all the birds are screaming. Everybody wants something or has something happening to them. It's very, very intense. And so part of the colony, the more silent part of the colony, are brown pelicans, and there are thousands of them. And just as the terns and laughing gulls, the brown pelicans are also all doing, everyone is incubating at the same time. Chicks are hatching, chicks are dying, adults are getting injured. There's just so much happening. And so the next piece is another situation that I created before seeing brown pelican in the wild. And I created this piece from specimens at the American Museum of Natural History, but also I went to the Bronx Zoo to look at their pelicans and kind of study their behavior and just get a more live, a sketching from life kind of feeling. And I really enjoyed doing this piece because I was able to get into and create these beautiful folds and get into the details of the top of the bill and just these wonderful folds in the skin here. And so it was a lot of fun to be able to create that. And now, you know, it's one of those magical moments where when I was creating this piece, I never, when I mean never, I never imagined that I would be monitoring thousands of them. So this piece is special to me in that sense because there's that connection there. Okay, so moving on, we are changing locations now. So we are going into the Chihuahuan Desert in New Mexico. And I truly love the Chihuahuan Desert. I have been there multiple times before working there. And while I was working there, I was working for the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. And what I was doing was vegetation and bird surveys. But of course, while I was there, I had to visit a friend. You can't go to New Mexico without visiting a friend. Um, and so a lot of the surveys that the Bird Conservancy of the Rockies conducts is on private lands. And so every season that there are these surveys that are conducted, BCR sends out thank you notes to the private landowners for, you know, giving us the opportunity to survey on their lands. And so what they like to do is to have an original piece of artwork sent with, if possible, with that letter. And so at the time, my supervisor at the time, she knew that I was an illustrator and she asked me to do it. And of course, I said, yes, I'm not going to say no to that. This is a great opportunity to give something, you know, while we're able to do these surveys. But she also said that I had to choose the species. And so that was a great problem for me. It's a good problem to have, I guess, because the amount of species, the different, wonderful, beautiful species that are in New Mexico, inhabiting the Chihuahuan Desert, inhabiting, you know, in around the Chihuahuan Desert, endless amount of birds to choose from. Meadowlarks, there's a Chihuahuan meadowlark also I don't have pictured here, sagebrush sparrows, you know, all types of sparrows, green-tailed towhee, black-throated sparrow, wonderful Paraluxia, Say's phoebe. And so I had a really hard time choosing from all of these species which one would be the best representative. So I just let it go in the sense of I'm not going to pressure myself. When it comes, it'll come to me. And so, of course, I'm birding for my job, but I'm also birding on my days off. And this wonderful greater roadrunner, I see greater roadrunners on my surveys, but they're doing exactly that. They are running. So this one was on a trail and it was doing something interesting and it was not running. So I was like, okay, I'm going to sit here and watch this bird and see what's going on with it. And it was picking up sticks and dropping sticks, picking up sticks and dropping them. And I was so confused. What's going on? And finally, it decided on this stick. And it ran over to a hedge of cacti and it just stood there. And I didn't know what was going on. It just stood there with the stick in its bill. And next thing you know, this other roadrunner comes out of the bunch of cacti and the roadrunner with the stick presented the stick to the second roadrunner. And all of a sudden, there was an explosion of head bopping, tail wagging going on. I mean, it was just such a fantastic moment. I was so happy that I decided to stop, wait, and observe and see what's going on. It was really fantastic. And right then and there, in that moment, I was like, well, that's the bird. So that made my decision. And then so from there, you know, I took these images and multiple other images, and I went through different sketches trying to figure out what I wanted to look like. At the time, I was in the field. I only had my graphite pencils with me. I didn't have color pencil. And I ended up creating this image of the greater roadrunner next to the cacti. because that was where the magic happened. And so this was sent out with thank you notes to the landowners. And it was the second time that my artwork was used to support conservation. And so the transition of from taking botanical illustration classes, you know, going to the workshops at American Museum of Natural History, where I'm creating work for myself and I'm creating work for other people. But this was the second time that I had the opportunity to create work for conservation. And so that made me feel really happy that I had that opportunity, which leads me to my next one. So, as Jennifer mentioned, that I am the Bird of the Year artist for the ABA. And I wanted to be the Bird of the Year artist for a little while now, but I had no clue how do you get there? How do you become this person? And I had no clue. And every year would pass and I would just say, okay, I'll just keep working harder on this work. I'll just keep practicing. I'll just keep doing it. Came a point in time, I started sending emails out, very cold emails to people I didn't know, just names that were listed as editor on Birding Magazine. Like, how can I do this? So eventually they got back to me and asked me if I was still interested. I didn't know what the species was. I was like, I don't care. I'm doing it. Yes, I'm interested. And then I found out that it was a golden-winged warbler. So I was even more excited that, wow, this amazing thing is happening. Because who does not want to love a golden-winged warbler? Who doesn't love a golden-winged warbler? They're absolutely fantastic warblers. And so in the beginning, when I got the news, I was excited. And then I panicked because I didn't know how I was going to do this, what message I wanted to convey, because it was really important for me to create this work for conservation with a message in the visual. And so I have a short video here that basically shows the process of me going through different iterations of sketches and the progress of the work. And I'll play that for you right now. There's no audio to this, by the way. Oops. And so my whole idea was to, as I mentioned, was to incorporate some kind of conservation message visually. And so one of the things that I thought was important was to highlight female birds and the research that is happening with female birds, and also the wintering grounds, and including an annual cycle conservation, and highlighting the significance of the importance of what happens on the wintering grounds influences the breeding season. And so that was why I had the female here. This is Costa Rica. This is the Arenal volcano where I saw golden-winged warblers there. And then I had the male on the breeding grounds and included a spectrogram. And so one of the reasons why I included a spectrogram is because a lot of times when we think about conservation and then we're losing our species, we're losing our birds, the first thing we think about, well, I won't say everyone, but a lot of people think about is that we're losing visually these birds, but we're also losing them acoustically. And so imagine a world where you can't hear, the golden-winged warblers are gone, but it's not just visually, but you'll never hear their song again. And so that was one of the reasons why I put that in there, to highlight that it's not just the birds we're losing the sound that comes with them. And I wanted to highlight that. And that was one of the reasons why I put that in there. And I wanted to, last but not least, give recognition to researchers and ornithologists that are in Central and South America that are not getting credited or are valued for their research that they do down there. And that it's important that we work together as a whole to conserve all of the species that are migratory species that need attention, and even the ones that don't need attention, because at some point maybe they will. So that was really my inspiration and my thinking behind creating this piece. And so I created this, I did a bit of research on the plants. Like I said, I've been to Costa Rica, so I kind of have an idea of what a lot of the habitats look like. And I made this hybrid tree where we'll never see a tree that's like this loaded with epiphytes from Costa Rica and then connected to willow, a salix species. But I connected them this way on purpose to show that we should be connected and that this conservation effort should be full circle. And so that was my inspiration of putting the male on the top and the spectrogram and having the female on the non-breeding grounds, just to highlight the importance of all of those messages. And so now I will step into my last story. And this last story was also published in Birding magazine for the September issue. It's also special to me, and it's actually perfect as the last story. It just so happens to be, because it includes bioacoustics, as well as the opportunity to illustrate. And so, as usual, I'm going to start with the call. I would be surprised if anyone knows this. So this sound, I heard this song one day, and it registered very out of place for me. I am usually, wherever I am, I'm pretty in tune with as far as the soundscape. And I felt like, wait a minute, what is that? But at the time, I couldn't chase the sound because I had to go to work. So I had to just let it go and hope that I would hear it again. And so maybe about a week and a half later, give or take some time there, I did hear it again. And this time I had the opportunity to chase the sound. And so what I did, I ran out with my recorder out of my home, and I got this recording. But as soon as I got there, I could not find this bird. The bird was high in the canopy, dense foliage. I just couldn't see the bird. And next thing you know, it flies off. I knew it was some kind of dove species, but I didn't know. I didn't really see it. I went back, put the recording that I had just made in a spectrogram, and by sound, it gave me Inca dove vibes. So I looked Inca dove, didn't quite fit. Kind of, but not really. So I was really confused of what was that. So fast forward to me now obsessively thinking about this bird, going out, and I heard it again, chasing it again, didn't see the bird, got more recordings. Once again, didn't see the bird, got more recordings. Finally, one day I heard it, and it was very close to where I was living. I went outside and I saw it. Finally, in plain, you know, without foliage around it or anything for a split, maybe 2 minutes. And I was like, that's an Inca dove. But my brain was telling me, no, that's not. So there was like this conflicting ID that was happening. And I finally got an image of it. And when I saw the bird in its entirety, I was like, that looks like a common ground dove, but not really. It's too big. I was so confused. So I took all my recordings and I took my images. There was one image that I don't have here. It's a flight shot, which shows the primaries, secondaries, and the rectrices. And so I took all that information and I sent it out to a few people. And everyone responded back saying it is, in fact, a hybrid, Inca dove, common ground dove hybrid. And for me, it was so exciting because we all looked in, I did research, other people also did a little bit of research to kind of, you know, as a backup, never have been documented before. Not to say that it hasn't happened before, but not necessarily documented. And so Inca dove, common ground dove hybrid. And that made sense why it kept giving me Inca dove vibes. But then when I see it, I'm like, that might be a common ground dove. And so what I did was I decided to illustrate one of the standout characters, which was the tail. And I did a little bit of a process of elimination where I illustrated for the article Mourning Dove Tail, Inca Dove Tail, and a common ground dove tail. I ruled out mourning dove because of the pattern in the tail. So now we have left Inca dove and a common ground dove. So if the Inca dove, we've got these long, slim tail with the outer rectrices with quite a bit of white there. Common ground dove, very short tail. Sorry, this is cut off. A little stubby tail here, and just a tad bit of white. And so the bird in question, this is what the tail looked like, where it's elongated, not as long as the Inca dove, but it's definitely not a short stubby tail like a common ground dove. And when you look at the white, it's an intermediate amount of white. So there were other characters that pointed towards this hybrid vocally, as well as the tail feathers, but then there were also other patterns that exhibited Inca dove scaling that was very light, but I don't have that shown here, but it's in the article. So this was a really special moment for me because it's that end of the story where I'm using bioacoustics and I'm using illustration all in one. And yeah, it was just a fantastic experience to find this bird, but also to be able to use both of my passions. And so, yeah, that is pretty much everything. This is my snow bunting that I illustrated before I saw a snow bunting. And thank you so much for being here and listening to all my stories and this journey of birding, art, and bioacoustics. And we'll open it up for a Q&A.
Thank you, Natasha. That was fantastic. So many just amazing images for all of us to sort of feast our eyes on, and great stories to go along with them. We do have questions from our audience, so I'll be happy to throw those your way. Our first question is really about process. So we have a question about how you apply the graphite. So do you apply graphite with a tortillon or blending stump brush, or both?
None of them. I use a pencil. I don't, so I use these, and that's the technique that I learned at the New York Botanical Garden. It's micro circles, and it's very tedious and it's very long, but I'm blending with the pencil only. And then sometimes I use an eraser to take away graphite and then I reapply. So I do a bit of blending with the pencil, micro circles. And if it's a bit too much, I'll take away with an eraser and then I'll reapply again to give it a smoother layer. I don't necessarily like to use the blending stubs, although you can cover a lot of ground with the blending stub. But for me, when I use it, it almost gives it too much of a foggy look for me. Like it takes something away from me. And I mean, it looks fantastic when other people do it, but for me, I personally don't like to use it because it almost, I don't know, like takes away a little bit of character for me, at least. Maybe I'm using the stubs wrong.
I doubt it. Well, that's great. Good insight into the process. Very simple, pure, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we have another question. How much do you do in the moment when you are seeing the birds from life?
It depends. I usually do a lot of yeah, I would say 50-50 part of the time. So sometimes I am relying on my camera and I'll spend a lot of time in the moment taking photos of that I can use later. But there's often enough times that I will do base sketches in the field. And so when I'm doing those, I'm usually doing movement. So I'm not worrying about a detail of the eye. I'm worrying more, I would say I'm working more on behavior and position. So no details at all, just quick scribbles and just movement and behavior. And more
That's
ideas. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so we have another question. Have you come across many hybrids that you've been able to hear the calls?
No, that was the first one, and I still can't believe it. Like I'm being honest, I still can't believe it. All I know is what I heard, I couldn't let it go because I was like, something is not right. I don't know what it is, but something's not going on, something's not right here. So that
Amazing.
was my first one, and it was just, yeah, it was really my intuition that just made me continue to pursue it. It just kicked in like, no, keep going. You have to find this bird because it sounds something's going on. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Amazing experience in the field. And I encourage everyone to get your hands on that copy of Birding Magazine that has Natasha's article. What month was it?
September.
September of this year.
Mhm.
Um, we have a question about your photos. So we have a question that says, I love the close-up photos that you've taken. Thank you for sharing. Would like to know what the focal length of the camera is, the lens that you used.
300.
300.
Mhm.
It's a nice and close. Good zoom.
Yeah.
One question about, again, about your process. So what do you use for colored pencils? And how was the transition from graphite to color?
The transition was rough. That is one thing that I love about graphite because, like I said in the beginning, it's so forgiving. My transition into color pencil was rough. I will be completely transparent. I did a very silly thing in the beginning. I did not have the right light bulb. So my light bulb was not pure natural white light. It was tinted yellow and I didn't know. And at the time I was I was doing butterflies and plants and combining graphite and color pencil together. And then I worked so hard on this butterfly that was, I forgot the species right now, but it was supposed to be like yellowish, orangish, but then in outside it was not that color because I was working with a yellow tint on my paper. So that was a mess. But lesson learned,
Learn.
I have my natural lamps now. I use Faber-Castell color pencils. But recently I have started to use Caran d'Ache Luminous, and those are fantastic. And so the transition, it was rough. It's still sometimes challenging, simply because the limitation in colors for color pencil. So it's not like paint where you can go ahead and like, okay, let me mix and let me get, the color, exact coloration that I'd like. You can mix with color pencil. However, there is some limitation. So sometimes that gets a little frustrating. And then because I like to get really fine details, I like the new Caran d'Ache that I'm using because you can really sharpen the pencil and get a really nice point. So you can get that fine line. Whereas with the Faber-Castell, although those are great color pencils, very difficult to get that fine point.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I am going to ask a question about, I'm particularly interested in your interest in art that supports conservation. And of course, here at MABA at Mass Audubon, we are very interested in how art can be powerful and inspire people to act and take action. And I think it's really interesting how you talked about the partnerships we need to have, and how we need to work together with our international colleagues to think about wintering grounds and breeding grounds, and that we're trying to tell one story, right? And I wonder if you're working on anything or towards something that you might want to share that kind of brings together art and conservation, or that supports conservation.
Right now I am not working on something specifically. I have some ideas that at some point in time, sooner than later, I would love to come see to fruition. But they are all basically outreach in the sense of, because I think like when you have a piece of artwork, and someone can see it and they can love it, they won't even know what bird species that is, what habitat is that. They won't know anything, but because they love the piece, they're gonna ask, oh, well, what bird is that? And that's where it starts. And so I think that having exhibits that are focused on not necessarily just people who are already interested in conservation, but for the general public that they just want to have, appreciation of art. And that's where it starts, because that's where you get that spark of, almost like a spark bird. It's like a spark piece of artwork, of conservation artwork, that can trickle down into other things.
That's great. I agree. Yeah, let's get more spark art.
Spark art.
It doesn't roll off the tongue, but I
Yeah,
like
spark art.
Natasha, thank you so much. We are just out of time. This was wonderful. Thank you for your thoughts and for sharing your art. And thank you to our audience for your participation in the birdsong quizzes
Yeah,
that came
that
up
was
throughout.
awesome.
And we hope that you'll join us in a couple of weeks for our final lecture in this series, The Art of Birds. We'll have Marwin Begay, who is a Navajo artist who does incredible woodblock prints of birds that speak to Navajo cultural stories. So I hope that everyone will join us for that. Thank you all for being here. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.